If you'll stay with me while I talk about how to cook chicken, I promise I'll explain how it's related to woodworking. But the big idea in common here is that following the instructions is valuable, but knowing the why behind the instructions is even more valuable. Everybody from my home ec teacher in high school to my mother to the Betty Crocker cookbook, if you ask any of them, what's the temperature for cooking chicken? It's 165. It's one of the few things in my life that hasn't changed much. And the answer's not wrong. It's correct, but it's not complete. We cook chicken to kill the bacteria in it to make it safe to eat. And heat is what kills bacteria. But it turns out that the bacteria start dying at around 130 degrees. And the higher the temperature, the faster they die off. It's a function of heat and time. Why do we say 165? Because that's the temperature at which the bacteria dies instantly. How is it useful to know this? The higher the temperature, the drier the chicken is. If you have the equipment to hold your chicken at 155 instead of 165 and hold it there for half an hour, your chicken is just as safe, but it's a lot juicier. This is why the knowledge behind the guideline turns out to be useful. Why doesn't the chicken explain this in greater detail? Because saying 165 is just shorter. The longer the instructions, the more confused people get. Cook your chicken at 165 is the shortest version of the instructions that is completely safe. I do like to follow the instructions, but I also really like understanding what's behind them. And in almost every area of my life, I find that depth of understanding to be useful. Not every area. For example, my veterinarian tells me that dogs aren't supposed to have grapes. I'll be honest, I'm curious. I get curious about things. Why can't dogs have grapes? What would happen if they had grapes? But have I studied this? No, because I don't think it would be useful. Turns out it's fairly effective to just follow the instructions and make sure the little menace doesn't steal a grape. Okay, what does this have to do with woodworking? Glue. Clamp for a minimum of 30 minutes. Clamp. What does that mean? How much latitude do I have to interpret the word clamp? How much pressure does it really require? Titebond.com. Required clamping pressure enough to bring joints tightly together. Parentheses. Generally 100 to 150 pounds per square inch for softwoods, 125 to 175 psi for medium woods, and 175 to 250 for hardwoods. I bet the science of how to get good joints from wood glue is really complicated. I bet you that Titebond has people with master's degrees in glue engineering, and I bet they have product managers who are responsible for the instructions on the back of the bottle and the instructions on the website. And I bet you those two groups of people argue sometimes, because probably the product manager asked the engineers, hey, can you give me some text I can put on the back of the bottle and on the website? And those engineers responded, sure, I'll send you something next week. And next week came and they sent 10 pages of text. Because I think there's a ton of variables. I think it's probably got more complexity than cooking chicken. What's the surface area? What kind of wood? Which way is the grain going? Which kind of grain is it? End grain? Long grain? How flat and straight are the surfaces? What's the humidity in the shop? What's the temperature in the shop? My goodness, the 10-page version they sent to the product managers was probably after they edited it down for brevity. Why am I talking about all this? Because recently I used Titebond glue in a fashion that ended in failure. To be clear, I am not criticizing Titebond's instructions, nor am I blaming them. My failure happened while I was making a table for this radial arm saw. The table needs to be 1-inch thick MDF. And the most common way to get 1-inch thick MDF is to take 1/2-inch thick MDF and glue 2 layers together. The guy over at the Profiled Corner YouTube channel gave me all the instructions I needed, and if I had followed them, I probably wouldn't be in this situation now. What he suggested, and what I should have done, is to put the glue between the 2 layers of 1/2-inch MDF, put them on a flat surface, and then put a bunch of weights on them, in effect taking the place of clamps. Why didn't I do that? because I went to the Titebond website and I looked up what the PSI needed to be for their glue, and the lowest number I saw on a quick skim was 100 PSI. I was gluing up a half a sheet. That's 2,300 square inches. 100 pounds per square inch times 2,300 square inches? Technically, I needed 115 tons of weight. Using weights as clamps worked fine for that other guy, but just in case, I think I'll do clamps. Because the Titebond instructions say I might need 100 PSI. And clamps are really the only way to get that, so just in case, I'll do that. Even that might have worked out fine if I were more careful, but no, I ended up with a front table that has a really big dip in the middle of it. There were all kinds of ways to be successful with this. Somehow I managed to avoid all of them and end up with a table shaped like a banana. I'm pretty sure the actual PSI necessary for this glue to hold really well, I bet you there are scenarios where it's way less than 100 PSI. I bet you one of those scenarios is 2 sheets of MDF, very flat, with glue spread very evenly and very thinly between them. So for like the millionth time in my life, I learned the same lesson again. Following the instructions is good, but the instructions are short, and there are good reasons for that, but it still means the instructions are incomplete, which is why having the knowledge of the person who wrote the instructions is better.